Matthew, thanks for your time. Good to talk to you. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, the particulars of this Cubs team, 39 and 46, 85 games in. Are you shocked? Are you surprised at all with the season that they put together so far?
Maybe I'm a little less surprised than some. I know some Cubs fans had very high expectations, or at least hopes, coming into
Right.
this season, right? But when you looked at the statistical projections and you just sort of felt out what is something very similar to the same roster as last year, when you had some guys performing maybe above their career standard, I came into this season thinking this is probably something like a 500 team. Obviously, they haven't even been that. And so that's a big problem. Signifies a lot of things. But I think if you told me they would be 39 and 46 at this stage of the season, I wouldn't have been flabbergasted. It's awfully surprising, and I think especially worrisome how they've gotten here.
Brewers are 50 and 34. We just got a really good chance to kind of compare and contrast the two, watching them play each other. And by the way, you've got about $100+ million difference in payroll with the Cubs about 230, and the Brewers well below that. Watching them, what should concern Cubs fans the most? Seeing what's happening across the dugout in a team in their own division.
Yeah, I think it's almost more than the players over there. It's what so many of them symbolize, which is that the Brewers are better at player development than the Cubs. They might be better at scouting than the Cubs. Maybe that one's a horse apiece, but they're better at instruction, better at development. And you know what? Their front office is also more proactive. They don't wait till their back is to the wall. They don't wait till there's half a season left on a player to make a decision about, do we have to move on from him or not? They're going out, they're making proactive moves. They're finding guys you didn't even know were available in trade. I mean, that's how they got William Contreras, who is probably going to start the All-Star game behind the plate this year. Those are the kinds of moves that have been missing from Jed Hoyer's portfolio ever since he took over the team. And we're missing for even much of Theo Epstein's regime, too. The Cubs just have not been, whether that's an ownership thing, a disposition of the front office thing, or this front office sort of came up at the beginning of the sabermetric revolution, the early 21st century. Did the game move too much under their feet? I'm not sure. But when you look at that Brewers team, they do so many more things. They're so much more nimble, dynamic. And I don't just mean in how they play baseball. I mean in how the team is constructed as well than the Cubs are.
Did Jed Hoyer get fooled at all by maybe how much Craig Counsell was doing for the Brewers organization?
I think Counsell has done a better job than we're in probably any position to realize, right? It's a really tough spot for him to come into a team that had some known holes in the roster, some things that they chose not to address this offseason. Now, what any manager, the proportion of their influence over how the roster is built, it's proportionate to their salary. This is the highest paid manager in the game. He has the loudest voice in the room about who gets put on the roster and who doesn't of any manager in the game. So he can take some share of that blame, but he hasn't had a lot to work with once the season got started. And then once the injuries started rolling, there's been these segments of the year early on. They were missing a lot of their key position players at once. Recently, they're missing a bunch of their starters. Guys are pitching at less than 100%. And all along, the relievers, the bullpen's just been eviscerated by that. Julian Merriweather and Albert Alzolay, first and foremost. So Counsell hasn't had a lot of chance to do some of the things that he did so well in Milwaukee. I still think he's done a decent job, all things considered, but he's not a magic man. And that's what it would have taken so far this year.
I like what you wrote. You said that the front office for the Cubs should evaluate not this half a season, but the last season and a half, because we virtually watched the same team the last 2 years. Is that what you think they'll do?
No. If I'm being honest, it's not. I mean, doesn't it just feel like, if you're thinking about this from Jed Hoyer's perspective, and I don't get the sense that the Ricketts family is eager to move on from Jed Hoyer or even actively considering it. But if I'm Jed Hoyer, I'm thinking, boy, I just shelled out the most money in big league history for a manager. I have a $230 million payroll. Now, it's my opinion. It's many people's opinion. The Cubs should be spending more than that. But Tom Ricketts can say, hey, $230 million is a lot of money, man, and you've misspent some of it.
To be in last place.
I'm not eager to press a reset button there to sort of back off of some of those investments and try shifting things around, I might get told no the next time I go ask for the checkbook. And I might get told, yeah, I'm going to open the checkbook, but someone else is going to hold it. So I think they're in this really tricky spot where what they need is proactivity, nimbleness, and it's exactly what the chief decision maker is in no position to pursue.
Yeah, it's interesting because Jed Hoyer to me seems somewhat risk averse, especially when it comes to big contracts. But what's worse, missing on a guy from a big contract standpoint, or still spending a hefty amount of money, they're 8th in all of Major League Baseball, and being in last place without taking said risk, right? It's like he's not being risky, but at the same time, he's still going to look foolish to his owner, a $230 million payroll, who's sitting at the bottom of the division.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I don't know that I can fully fault the process. At the time, I was very in favor of the Jason Hayward deal. I was less in favor of Dansby Swanson. I wanted them to aim at Trey Turner or Carlos Correa, but I understood that move. And I think what Hoyer was thinking was along the lines of, okay, we just watched a contract blow up on us and the owner kind of hold it against us and not let us spend the way we wanted to through the last cycle, right? This time, we're going to do things differently. I'm going to, instead of pursuing that young guy we expect to make a lot better because he's only 26 when he hits free agency, all this and that, let's pick a guy who's a finished product, who has a broad base of skills, who hopefully has a high floor. Well, you know what? We've quickly realized Dansby Swanson's missing a ceiling, and the floor's kind of fallen out on him too. So when you settle for that tier right below the true superstars, you're not just missing out on those superstars, you're still spending really big. $177 million on Dansby Swanson's still going to feel like a bad miss if he doesn't come back around in a hurry from here. So I think sometimes you got to, even though it's uncomfortable, and even though you're aware of the risk of getting this wrong, which other teams have done too, maybe you want to aim at the very top. And if you get it wrong, get it all the way wrong. It's better than getting it 85% of the way wrong and never having had even a chance of getting that Shohei Ohtani type, that Bryce Harper type return on your investment.
Although I'm with you and I don't think he's going to sell, is there anyone in the organization, top to bottom, minor league on down, that you think should be untouchable for the organization?
See, I think if there was someone in this organization we felt was untouchable, that'd be really great news and we probably wouldn't be in this situation, right? If I'm thinking about it, again, pulling out and thinking from the outside in, the Cubs in there probably think of a few of those guys as untouchable just because Justin Steele still has 3+ years of team control, because Nico Horner and Ian Happ are part of the nerve center of that clubhouse, all of that stuff. To me, they've got prospects who rank highly, but we've seen with PCA coming up this year what it means to have a prospect who ranks highly. It's no guarantee of anything these days. And they just don't have that elite player who I think, they're going to make 5 of the next 7 all-star teams, and I'm much more interested in extending them than potentially moving them. Doesn't mean they should be entertaining trading prospects right now. Like we said, they're 39 and 46. But I don't think there's anyone, save maybe Cade Horton, that you hang up right away if somebody calls about him.
Not a Matt Shaw.
Yeah, that one's an interesting case. And I think part of that is how much do you trust the Cubs player development infrastructure? We go back to that comparison to the Brewers, right? If Matt Shaw were in the Brewers system right now, he'd be a lot closer to untouchable, both because the Brewers need to husband the resource of a young player under cost control, maybe more than the Cubs do. Also because I trust other teams, not just the Brewers, a fistful of them, to convert a player like Matt Shaw into a legitimate, high-caliber big league contributor sooner than I trust the Cubs to do that. It's just not what they've successfully done. Even when they've gotten their hands on good talent lately, they don't hit that 75th, that 80th, 90th percentile outcome for these guys. They're settling right at average, sometimes below it. I mean, I think PCA might be trending toward being a 4th outfielder, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but it means you didn't exactly get the most out of the talent there, right?
Yeah, it certainly wouldn't live up to expectations, which kind of feels like what prospects do, but PCA was supposed to be above that a little bit. You wrote about it, now I can't unsee it. I mean, he looks like it's somewhat the opposite of Seiya Suzuki, right? Seiya looks like he's already decided he's not going to swing, which seems like a terrible approach to me, especially
Yeah.
first pitch fastball the second time around if you've already seen a pitcher. PCA looks like he's going up there, he's already decided, right? I mean, you broke down the numbers. Part of his problem is he swings at everything. Oftentimes they're out of the zone, and so you can't really put that speed to work if you can't get on base.
Can't put his speed to work, can't put his power to work, right? I mean, the tool set was supposed to be, it's a lot of speed. He's also going to crack 15 homers for you because there's bat speed here. And he's going to swing and miss some. So he makes up for it by splitting a lot of gaps, and that lets him let the legs out, get triples instead of doubles, all that stuff. It just has not shown up yet. And it's all about, if you can't wait for your pitch, you're not going to get on base. You're not going to be able to use your speed because you just drew a walk. You're also not going to get as many hits because you're just going to hit the ball a lot. In the minors, you can get away with that more. It'll sneak through an infield, or you'll beat out a routine grounder to short. It's not going to happen in the big leagues, man. You got to make big adjustments. I mean, he's swinging beyond Javier Baez levels of aggressiveness right now. And we all watched Javier Baez for years. He was a joy in a lot of ways. He was also a little bit of a miracle. That approach is not supposed to work. We're seeing now in Detroit that it doesn't necessarily work for the long term. Well, for PCA, he's even past that. And the way he does it, it doesn't even work in the short term. It's got to change.
Who else on this lineup has you most disappointed, or as far as underperforming, that you think it'll take him to turn it around for the Cubs to turn it around? It's going to take a number of them, but who would be a guy you would point out first?
Probably Christopher Morel. I think, Miguel Amaya has been so bad, just unfathomably bad. I couldn't have imagined him being this bad. But it's the catcher spot. You know it's probably not even going to be league average. That's okay. Christopher Morel, they had him slotted in for so long as the cleanup hitter. Why was he cleaning up for so long, Judson? And it's partially because the expected stats said he'd be better. Well, you can get carried away with the expected stat stuff. And that's not me being against numbers, against the math of the game. That's where I live. But I think sometimes we apply stuff that's meant for large samples of people and large samples of plate appearances and apply it to one person over a small sample, and it overlooks things. It smooths out rough patches that actually need to be examined more closely. I think Morel is making some bad swing decisions. He's getting passive in the wrong places, like you just mentioned with Seiya Suzuki. As Morel has tried to moderate, his own aggressiveness, he's done it in the wrong places sometimes, and he's missing his pitch. He's mishitting a whole bunch of pitches. That's why we see him foul the ball off his foot all the time. And it's just adding up to an ineffectual profile, which is really disappointing from this guy with so much obvious sort of raw offensive ability.
Can we circle back to Craig Counsell? Because there's a difference between bad teams and teams playing bad baseball. The Cubs playing really bad baseball as far as how many outs they make on the bases, defensively at times. You saw how Justin Steele felt about the way that this team is playing defense. You don't see. Listen, I'm not going to say that it's a bad deal as of yet for the Cubs to pay what they paid Craig Counsell, but as of now, he's had a horrible start to the first half of the season leading the Cubs.
Yeah, and you want to see, it's supposed to be the sign of a well-managed team that they just play tight, smart baseball, and that hasn't been what's happened. There's all these things floating around. Like, you hired him late in the cycle because he had to wait and become a free agent. Unlike almost any other managerial candidate you're evaluating, he's coming from a job. His contract didn't expire till October 31st. You were afraid to even ask the Brewers for permission to talk to him before then. Well, you ended up with Craig Counsell supported by David Ross's coaches. And I'm not saying they're bad coaches. I think there's a few of them in there that it's really good they got to retain. It's also a lot of people Craig Counsell only kind of knows. Craig Counsell knows, he's deeply enmeshed in the game, and he knows these guys a little bit. But I don't know that he got to run spring training exactly the way he normally would. His coaching staff is still intact in Milwaukee and might be part of the reason why the Brewers aren't missing him very much. So he might not have gotten to instill some of that stuff in the way he would normally do it. Now, He's got to be creative. He's got to be flexible. And he's got to find ways to hold what are really veteran players that we know are better than this accountable. So that shouldn't all fall to other coaches. That should be something that Counsell can say, identify the leader in there. And if someone's not playing up to snuff, ask that person to go talk to him. Here's the problem, is there are a few identified leaders in there beyond Justin Steele. There's Nico Horner, Dansby Swanson, Ian Happ. You know, three of the guys who have struggled the most on defense so far this year, who have made some of the most boneheaded base running plays? Ian Happ, Dansby Swanson, Nico Horner. What happens when the guys you're counting on not only to play great defense, but to hold other people accountable, to always have your head in the game, to make the routine play routinely, they're not even doing it? Then I don't know what the manager's supposed to do there. It's a real no-win situation, and I don't even know what to say that reflects about the organization. It might just be Buzzard's luck, but it's an awful big cluster of that and hard to explain away.
You know, the Cubs to me are a good reminder that there's a difference between good friendship and good chemistry, right? Because chemistry, sometimes it takes not being a friend, not being the one that's invited to every party or invited to the wedding. And those three guys that you mentioned, they all seem to be good friends. And at times it's looked like someone hasn't wanted to upset the apple cart, and then finally Justin Steele did, and we all kind of, waved our arms in the air. Meant very little. But at the same time, I think that this is a team that's looking for any sort of chemistry, and Craig Counsell hasn't been able to crack it. It's one of the brilliance of Joe Madden. I think I was so impressed with what he was able to do. And Craig may need a shakeup to be able to kind of shake up a team that seems to be close-knit, but not necessarily have great chemistry. Last one for you, Matt. July was the magic month for the Cubs last year that made things so interesting. I'm assuming you probably don't think, what did they rally off? 10 of 11 last year, I want to say. You probably don't see a big spark coming for this group for them to somehow make a push towards the playoffs in September?
I don't. I mean, I'm not sure I would have said that I saw that coming last year either.
Right.
But this time feels different, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It just feels different.
Yeah, because Bellinger feels so different.
Yeah. I mean, last year, Cody Bellinger had like an 1,100 OPS in July. Even just once he came back from the month he missed after that knee injury last May and early June, he was firing on all cylinders. This year, since June 12th, he has a 281 slugging percentage. Slugging. He's slugging 281. That would have to just reverse itself completely, which is very hard to count on. And you add to that, the starting pitching's been good. It's starting to strain a little bit under the pressure of these injuries, plus the bullpen. The bullpen, even in 2021, when they sort of improbably hung around until July, in 2020, when they won in that very strange season, but it all felt sort of cobbled and just barely held together, the bullpen. Every time. They were good at that for a long time, and it paid big dividends. Well, this year, the bullpen's broken, and there's no fixing it. I mean, you look out there, Porter Hodge can be as good as he wants to be, and I think there's a ceiling on that because he walks a lot of people, but let's say Porter Hodge turns into a relief ace. There's no second guy. There's not a first guy out there right now. They are third to last in the league, ahead of only the Rockies and the White Sox in the percentage of their relief appearances that are scoreless. Just have one guy come in and get even 3 outs without letting up a run. They'd have 5, 6, 7 extra wins if they just had one guy every now and then come in and not give up 1 run in 1 inning, which would be a 9 ERA. Just avoid doing that for 1 day, and it would make a huge difference in the season. They haven't been able to, and I don't see how they would suddenly be able to. This bullpen is bad and not getting better. So it doesn't mean it's impossible that they'll turn it around, but I couldn't possibly predict for you what it would look like.
Matt, I enjoy your work. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Justin.